After the senator's election in 2020 in Korea, people started claiming that it was the fraud election. What are the reasons? First, some voting observers who watched the early voting process said that the signature on the seal, which was on the early voting box, was not his signature. Secondly, the statistics. Some ratio between out-of-town votes against in-town votes are same between two candidates. Thirdly, there are many photographed evidence for the fraud elections. Let's see from the first. The signatures of voting observers on the seal were replaced. The seal on the voting box was not original one, but it seemed to be replaced with another one. The voting observer claimed that the signature on the seal is not his. He had photographed the seal on April 10 and compared it to the signature on April 15, the votes counting day. At least 5 boxes' signatures were not the original by comparison to the photos. Votes counting observer said that she did not expect that she would see a fraud election process like that. Her heart was beating loudly when she saw the signature because it was very different from the original one on the box photographed on the early voting day. The observer said that if someone detached the seal on the voting box and attached it again, then it meant that he or she could do something illegal with the votes inside the voting box. Observers also said that we need to inspect to find who signed illegally on the seal for the early voting boxes in all locations. Secondly, the weird number matching, which is statistically impossible. The early votes and the main votes results between candidates are extremely different. By the early voting only, the ruling party won greatly, earning 198 seats. By the main voting only, the opposite party won the election by earning 124 seats. Did people change their mind in just 4 and 5 days? The early voting date is April 10 to 11, and the main voting date is April 15. Moreover, just 25% citizens voted on the early voting day. However, 40% citizens voted on the main voting day. In hundreds of locations, less people made the election results, overcoming the outnumbered people. If we see each location, a weird percentage can be seen. In many locations, the percentages that two candidates earned are same. Candidate number 1 earned 35% of his votes in the early voting out of town, whereas candidate number 2 earned 35% of his votes in the early voting out of town as well. This ratio can be seen in many locations. So people suspect that the result is divided by computer program and not by counting the actual votes.
Also, the election voting papers are two kinds. The first one is for supporting candidate. The second one is for the supporting party. In a voting box repository in Gyeonggi State, a voting observer took a photo of pre-marked voting papers which were not seen to voted by humans. The reason that they are not voted by human is, the papers were not folded and looked new. The difference between votes for candidates and party is large, so it is weird. Although the ruling party won greatly in the early voting, it was only in the votes for candidates, not in the votes for supporting party. The voting result about supporting party indicates the opposite party won against the ruling party.
Young Chul-young, the election strategy leader for the ruling party, visited Bolivia a few months ago. Some people are suspicious if he practiced rigged election there. Morales, former president of Bolivia, had won the election in 2019 by the early voting result, similarly to Korean Parliament election 2020. Young Chul-young said, "I am afraid. I am frightened about the result." And he retired from all jobs. Now people don't know where he is, even if he is in Korea or not. The Korean electronic votes counting system did not work correctly in Iraq election, Congo election, Bolivian presidential election. Before the Congo election, Congo citizens visited the Miru Systems, a manufacturer of the Korean vote counting system suite, and protested not to supply the system to their country for vote counting. The early votes are not stored in an official voting box, but the votes were stored in a basket or a bread box, of course, without a seal. And this is a personal experience. An old madam went for voting with her granddaughter, but the election supervisor did not give a stamp on her voting paper. She found it before marking unclaimed it. The supervisor apologized that it was a mistake, but her granddaughter had a stamp. In a pharmacy, a pharmacist told her that she did not get a stamp either when she was voting, so she was suspicious the supervisor did not give a stamp intentionally for old people. If there is no stamp, the voting paper is not effective. The ruling party expects they can get more votes from young people than old people. The old people in Korea did not like the ruling party because they believe that the ruling party is communist.